The cabin lights dimmed as the engines hummed steadily, and for a while everything felt like an ordinary flight. Passengers were settling in, some closing their eyes, others flipping through magazines, and a few quietly whispering to their loved ones. But then the peace shattered. A group of men suddenly stood up, their voices sharp, their eyes cold. They weren't passengers anymore, they were hijackers. Fear spread through the cabin like fire. People froze in their seats, mothers held their children closer, and not a single person dared to move. Among them sat a woman, quiet and unnoticed, her expression calm even as chaos unfolded around her. She didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't even flinch when one of the hijackers stormed past her row. To everyone else, she seemed just another passenger, paralyzed by fear. But there was something different about her silence. She was watching, listening, and calculating, though no one realized it. The hijackers barked orders, demanding control, and the air thickened with panic. Every second felt heavier, every breath harder to take at the front of the plane. One man stood out, a passenger whose presence was hard to ignore. He wasn't dressed in uniform, but his bearing was unmistakable. He was a Navy SEAL commander, calm under pressure, eyes sharp as steel. He scanned the cabin, assessing the danger, searching for an opening. His instincts told him this was no ordinary situation, and survival depended on timing. The woman's silence caught his attention. While others trembled, she remained steady. It was as if she was waiting for something. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and without a word, a strange understanding passed between them. The SEAL knew she wasn't just any passenger. She was holding back, hiding something behind that quiet exterior. Then came the moment no one expected. In a bold move, the SEAL commander slid closer, his hand brushing against hers. In that instant, he made a decision that could change everything. He gave her his gun. The weight of the weapon rested in her hands, but the cabin was still full of threats, and the hijackers were only steps away. No one knew why he trusted her or what she was about to do, and in that silence, just before the first move was made, the entire plane held its breath, her fingers wrapped around the cold metal, and for a second, it felt unreal. She had never imagined holding a gun at 30,000 feet in the air, surrounded by terrified passengers and men who had turned the flight into a nightmare. Yet, the SEAL commander had seen something in her, something that no one else noticed. His steady eyes had carried a message. You're not as ordinary as you seem. The hijackers barked more orders, pushing the flight attendants toward the galley and keeping passengers pinned down in their seats. No one dared to speak above a whisper. Every sound, the clink of a dropped glass, the shuffle of footsteps, felt amplified. The woman remained still, her heart racing, but her face unreadable. She glanced at the commander, trying to understand why he trusted her with something so dangerous. She wasn't trained like him, or at least that's what everyone thought. But inside, she carried a past that wasn't meant to be revealed here. Not in front of strangers. The commander, calm, despite the storm around him, leaned just close enough to murmur a few words. He told her they needed to wait. That timing was everything. She nodded slightly, the weight of his trust settling deeper. Around them, fear clung to the cabin, but beneath that fear there was also an invisible current, an unspoken hope that someone might act. The hijackers grew restless, their voices sharper, their movements faster. It was clear they had a plan, but no one yet understood what it was. The passengers exchanged anxious glances, silently begging for the nightmare to end. The woman tightened her grip on the weapon, her mind racing with possibilities. She had stayed silent until now, but silence could not last forever. And when it finally broke, the entire course of the hijacking would change. She kept her eyes low, careful not to draw attention, but inside her mind, the memories began to surface. Years ago, before she ever stepped onto this plane, she had lived a very different life. She had been trained in ways most people could never imagine, but she had walked away from it, choosing silence and distance over the chaos of her past. To the outside world, she was just another traveler, a quiet woman blending in with the crowd. Yet now, with a gun in her hand and danger only steps away, the life she had tried to bury was pulling her back in. The SEAL commander seemed to sense it. His sharp eyes didn't leave her for long, and though he said little, his trust was clear. He had fought enough battles to know when someone had experience, and her calmness under pressure was no accident. The two of them didn't need many words. Their silence was its own language. Around them, the passengers shifted nervously, clutching armrests and whispering prayers. A child whimpered softly before being hushed by a trembling mother. The hijackers paced the aisle, their movements quick, their expressions unreadable. They weren't amateurs, there was precision in how they controlled the cabin, and that only made the tension sharper. The passengers were pawns in a larger game, but the rules of that game were still hidden. The woman's thoughts kept racing. Why now? Why this flight? The timing felt too perfect, too precise, as if she had been drawn into something she had tried to escape. Every second that passed pressed heavier on her chest, but she didn't let it show. She stayed quiet, steady, waiting. The gun was heavy, but her silence was heavier, and when it broke, nothing on that plane would be the same again. The seconds dragged like hours, every tick of the unseen clock pressing harder against the nerves of everyone on board. The hijackers had tightened their control, forcing passengers to stay seated, their voices growing sharper, more urgent. The air inside the cabin felt heavy, filled with fear and tension, but beneath that, there was something else, an unspoken sense that a breaking point was near. The woman sat still, her fingers pressed tightly against the weapon hidden between her hands and the fold of the seat. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, but her face never gave her away. Her silence, once mistaken for fear, was now strategy. Every glance, every breath, every small shift of her body was measured. She was waiting, watching for the moment when everything would align. The SEAL commander leaned slightly toward her, his voice barely a whisper as he gave her short instructions. He was calm, almost unnervingly so, as if he had been in this exact situation before. His confidence steadied her, but it also raised the pressure. If he trusted her to act, she couldn't afford to falter. Not when so many lives depended on it. The hijackers moved toward the cockpit, speaking in low tones none of the passengers could fully hear. Their leader glanced back down the aisle, scanning every face as if trying to detect rebellion. The woman lowered her gaze, but her grip tightened, her mind racing through possibilities. She could sense if their plan was reaching its peak, and soon they would make their final move. The cabin was silent except for the hum of the engines and the occasional sob. Passengers held their breath, waiting for something, anything, to change. And in that unbearable stillness, the woman knew the next moment would decide everything. The climax was coming faster than anyone could prepare for. Just as the silence grew unbearable, a sudden crackle broke through the intercom. A voice echoed through the cabin, low and commanding. But it wasn't the pilot's, it was one of the hijackers. He announced that the plane's course had changed, and they were no longer headed to their original destination. Gasps rippled through the passengers, fear shifting into full-blown panic. This was no bluff, something much larger was unfolding. And now every soul on board was trapped inside a plan no one fully understood. The woman's chest tightened as she realized the stakes had just risen. It wasn't just about survival anymore. The hijackers weren't looking for ransom or escape. Their goal was far bigger, more dangerous. The SEAL commander's expression hardened as he caught on to the same truth. This wasn't going to end with negotiation, it would end with decisive action. One way or another, then came the twist no one expected. From the back of the plane, a passenger suddenly stood up, his hands raised high. For a brief second, everyone thought he was trying to calm the hijackers. But the truth hit fast and hard. He wasn't a hostage at all. He was one of them. His calm reveal sent shockwaves through the cabin, crushing the fragile hope passengers had been holding on to. The hijackers weren't just a small group, they had planted someone inside the crowd. Watching, listening, waiting for the right time to strike. The woman froze, her mind racing faster than ever. If they had an infiltrator among the passengers, then every plan she and the commander had silently built was in danger. One wrong move could expose her, and the gun she held would no longer be a hidden secret. The SEAL's eyes met hers again, steady but urgent. The window to act was closing, and the danger had doubled. The plane was now a ticking clock, and every second was louder than the last. The cabin had become a pressure cooker of fear and tension, every passenger wide-eyed as the truth of the infiltrator sank in. The hijackers felt stronger now, more in control, their confidence rising as they barked new commands. But in the shadows of that chaos, the woman and the SEAL commander knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. There would be no second chance. Her grip on the gun tightened. With one silent nod, the commander shifted forward, his body angled to shield her. Time slowed, the roar of the engines faded. The whispers of the passengers dulled until all she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat. Then, in a flash, she broke her silence. She rose, quick and precise. Her movement sharp enough to cut through the fear that gripped the cabin. The infiltrator at the back froze in shock, his cover blown. The hijackers turned in panic, but they were too slow. The SEAL commander lunged, disarming the nearest threat with practiced skill, while the woman moved with the precision that revealed the truth of her past. She wasn't just an ordinary passenger, she had once been trained, every bit as capable as the man who had trusted her. The cabin erupted in chaos, but within seconds, the balance shifted. Passengers ducked low. Flight attendants shielded children, and the woman's voice finally rang out, clear and commanding, cutting through the noise. She wasn't silent anymore. Together, she and the commander overpowered the hijackers, their plan unraveling before their eyes. Relief swept through the cabin as fear began to crack, replaced by hope. But just as it seemed the nightmare was over, the final twist revealed itself. The intercom crackled again, and this time it wasn't any of the hijackers speaking. A calm, unfamiliar voice came through, one that neither the woman nor the commander recognized. It was coming from the cockpit. The plane was still under someone else's control, and the true mastermind had yet to show his hand. The calm voice over the intercom froze the cabin once more. For a moment, dread returned, but then the sound of struggling erupted from the cockpit. Seconds later, the door opened and the co-pilot stumbled out, his uniform torn, but his spirit unbroken. He had fought back against the last hijacker hiding inside, and with the help of the flight crew, he managed to regain control of the plane. The true mastermind's final attempt had failed. The woman lowered the gun at last, her arms trembling now that the weight of the moment had passed. The SEAL commander steadied her, his quiet nod acknowledging not only her courage, but the truth she had tried so hard to bury. She had been more than just a passenger, she had been the silent strength that tipped the balance. For the first time since the nightmare began, she allowed herself to breathe. Around them, passengers began to cry, some from relief, others from the release of fear they had been holding inside for hours. Parents hugged their children tighter. Strangers clutched each other's hands. And the cabin slowly shifted from terror to gratitude. The flight attendants moved carefully through the aisles, reassuring everyone that the danger was over and the plane was turning back toward safety as the engines carried them home. The woman looked out the window at the endless stretch of sky. She had wanted silence, a quiet life far away from the shadows of her past, but fate had forced her hand. And in that moment, she realized that silence could be powerful, but breaking it at the right time could save lives. The plane finally touched down. And as the wheels met the runway, the nightmare ended. What remained was a story of courage, trust, and the strength found in unexpected places, proof that even in the darkest skies, heroes can rise in silence.